my colleagues. And over to you, Simon.
So good evening. I'm really just here as a sort of warm-up act because I'm way past this myself. When I was looking at national awards, it was the old scheme and it was incredibly complicated, and it was not a matter of what you know as who you knew. I think where a lot of the awards were divvied out in the old days. Things have changed dramatically. I think possibly some for the better, a lot for the worse, because these awards aren't anything like they used to be. They're time limited. They're not pensionable. You can't reapply for. You can't extend them. You have to reapply for them. But I think the process of applying and getting the awards is easier. They've increased the number of awards. The old style support from external organisations has been removed. So which obviously favoured people whose faces fitted in organisations within the NHS rather than people who were actually delivering for themselves. So I think I've had a look through the way this new award system is structured. I have no intention of applying for it, but I think other people in the room, particularly Nick and Keaton, are probably far more au fait with the system and be able to give you a much better idea of how you should apply and what you should be looking to do. But I think it should be very interesting. I'm very waiting to hear what Nick has to say.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Simon. I'll just see if I can get my slides up now. How do I?
Just go to PowerPoint.
Go to PowerPoint at the bottom there.
Click on it.
Brilliant. So I'm Nick. For those people who don't know me, I'm a dermatologist. We've got my sort of conflict of interest slide, which goes in all the talks I do, nothing relevant to this. The relevant declaration is just a bit of history, a bit of my sort of history, which you're supposed to do when talking about Clinical Excellence Awards and NCA National Clinical Impact Awards. So I've been a consultant here since February '95. A bit of experience back in the 90s about the old system, where we set up a system just within dermatology, my specialty, to see if we could get people nominated. This is sort of what Sam was saying. It's a bit how it was done in the old days. A group of us got together and we tried to work out a voting system to try and get people forward. And then I sort of worked up through the old system. You can see over it, it took me over sort of from 1994 to 2021 to get up to a gold award where I am now. So over that period, I had lots of time, lots and lots of experience of scoring applications. So that's been for the hospital, for the British Association of Dermatologists, when I had various jobs in there for about 8 years. And when I was on the Council of the Royal College of Physicians for 2 years, I scored 150 awards a year doing that. So I've seen very many awards. And what's really the real point of this presentation is that there's some mistakes which are commonly made by everybody in applications, which are really easy to overcome. And so this is what I want to talk about today. I had the benefit of joining our local regional committee, which hands out the national awards. And in fact, I had my training on Tuesday this week with 20 of us on a webinar for 3 hours. And on that webinar was the guy who's in charge, the two people who are in charge of the whole system for the UK. So I had this real benefit. I was in a breakout room with one of them for an hour. So I had a real chance to ask them loads of questions. So I'm in a great position to be able to give you information if you want to ask me questions, because, I tried to find out as much as I could from them about what's different about the systems now. One of the things which is important is that now there were 300 awards a year. Now there's 600 awards a year. And the changes they've made are all about making it more accessible to encourage more people to apply and try and get away from the fact it's just old white men with lots of mates who get the award. So they've doubled the number of awards, and by doubling the number of awards within a fixed budget, that's why the value of awards has dropped and why they're no longer pensionable, because they decided they wanted to make it as accessible to people as possible. And the other really big change is it's no longer stratified. You don't have to do what I did, which spent many, many years working your way up to a higher award. If you're really good, you can go straight in at the N3 level, which is now the equivalent for Platinum Award, straight away. If you're brilliant enough, you can just hop straight in there at that level, and you don't have to wade your way up through the system but over many years. So it's supposed to be much more egalitarian and equal. The rewards last for 5 years and then they disappear. So you have to stay good if you want to keep on getting the award. They're not pensionable, so that's to save money. To make it more equal, if you're a less than full-time person, what I was told is that you get the full value of the award. So the idea is then it's not sort of discriminating basically people who are part-time workers. There's a big change, but it's about impact, and I'll come on to that a bit more when I tell you about what they advised me how they score. It's all about impact. No point being excellent at anything if you're not actually having any impact on patient care. They're getting rid of most of the citations from the employers, from the colleges and national societies. That's again to try and get rid of the sort of old boy network type thing. It's all about what you put down on your application. There's much more diversity in scorers. In my webinar on Tuesday, there's only 2 people who look like me in the webinar. And that was great to see that diversity. One thing we're not going to do is answer questions about finance and about pensions, which is outside remit. Get that up front.
Change tomorrow anyway.
Yeah, so the key thing is the scores are for national, not local work. So don't bother putting down much about local work. One of the faults you see in the national applications, people putting 3/4 of the space down for local work. You can't score more than 2 out of 10 for your local work. So don't bother filling it up with local work. You need to put down enough about your local work to show you're fulfilling your contract, but no more than that. It's all about national stuff. And the next thing is over and above what's in your job plan. So the job planning section is really important at the beginning. So someone's got their mic on, actually, if you can just...
I'll mute them, don't worry.
Yeah, it's over and above what's in your job plan. So if a scorer doesn't know what's in your job plan, they can't score you. So the real danger is you're going to get 0 if they can't score you. So you have to make it really clear what's in your job plan, demonstrate what you're paid to do and what you're not paid to do in the various jobs and roles which you have. And make sure that's completely honest and transparent, because that's the bit which the trust does have to approve to make sure you've been correct about that. As I said, this shows the different levels of awards and per year and the amount you get from them. So the N1 awards is now equivalent to the silver. There's 330 of those a year. So over 5 years, there'll be, what's that, 1650, something like that. Then there's 1,000, there's 200 a year for the N2, which is equivalent to the gold, and there'll be 1,000 of those. And the N3 is equivalent to the platinum, there'll be 70 a year, so there'll be 350 over a 5-year cycle. And you can see how much those are worth per year. That's less than the old awards, the old bronze, silver, gold awards. And there are some transition arrangements for people who have those old awards as we move over into this new award system. So the application is based on your paper, not the scorers are told, even if someone's got a wonderful reputation. So if you hear about them on the Today programme every day, telling you how their apps change the world. You don't score them on that, you score them on what is on the paper, not reputation. The other key point for you in writing your application is that there's lay and employer people scoring you. So if you write your application so it's full of technical stuff which only doctors can understand, you've got a real risk of getting 0 scores off the lay reviewers if they think, well, I just can't understand this, can't score them, give them a 0. So make sure that it's understandable. And I asked when I went on the course whether it was reasonable to give your application to say to a friend, to an intelligent lay friend, just have a read through, and then to reflect back to you what they think the key points in your application are. I think that might be a very good test to do. So the other thing about the scoring is the scorers are only allowed to give you 1 of 4 scores out of 2, which means you meet what's in your contract. 0 means you haven't provided enough evidence to show that. And then 6 means that it's over and above, or 10 means you're excellent. So basically, those are the 4 scores you can award for each domain, and you're not allowed any of the in-between scores. So that actually makes it simpler for the scorers. And the idea here is to try and avoid the bias you get where some people only use the middle 3 scores. And if you've done this scoring for things, some people always use 4, 5 and 6 for everybody. And some people use 0 and 10 for people. And then you get the people who use 0 and 10 get much more influence than the people who do the middle scores. The idea is to make it fairer, so the weighting. So it's 0, 2, 6 or 10. And that means that essentially what you have to demonstrate is in each domain, you're doing something which is over and above what's in your job plan. And that's the key point to consider when you're doing this. Make sure that you're giving really clear evidence about that. So it's not about quantity of stuff, it's about the quality. And this is just to say, make sure you read the guidance. In this talk here, I'm not going to talk about all the detail about everything you have to do. So make sure you've read the guidance. It's the same for anything, isn't it? If you don't read the guidance, you're not going to get it. So just going through some of the domains, I'm just going to give you a few sort of top tips as to what to do. So again, what I said at the beginning, local work will score 2 at best. So don't just put in your local work. Don't fill it. I've seen some applications where 75% of it is local work. Don't do that. Another top tip is don't put in the same evidence in different domains. You can talk about the same activity. So say you were a medical director, you can put that down in more than one domain, but you have to talk about different impacts that has in different aspects of the domain. You might have an education impact, a clinical impact, a research impact. That has to be different evidence. But if you provide this, if you put in the same evidence in different domains, it'll only score in one domain and get a 0 in the other one. A really key point is no abbreviations. This is about the lay reviewers, but also about people from other specialties. You know, if I'm reading an application from an anaesthetist, I may not understand some of the terms. I may not know some of the journals. Don't use abbreviations. Remember, it's likely to be read by people not from your specialty, lay reviewers and by managers. And so don't use abbreviations. If you're going to use abbreviations, write it out in full first time, put it in brackets. But there's nothing more difficult than reading a bullet point in an application, which is just a long list of abbreviations, trying to work out what on earth it's about. And again, people tend to score you down if you use too many abbreviations. Don't boast and exaggerate. Some people either undersell themselves and other people boast and exaggerate. So try and do the middle bit. Just try and don't undersell yourself, but just try and base what you're saying is on the evidence which you're provided. If you exaggerate, then it sort of weakens your other claims, because people will, if it's obvious you're exaggerating, then it will weaken what you're saying in other areas. Use the clear English. We said that already, so that lay and managerial people can understand it. And the other really key point along the abbreviations is put in dates for everything. If you don't put in a date for an action, you won't score. And the key thing is that it should be a recent date, ideally in the last 5 years, or since your last successful application. Then the other really important thing is describe the impact on NHS patients. So there's no point for me to put down as president of the British Association of Dermatologists. That will score me 0 points. If you put down as president of the British Association of Dermatologists, introduce all sorts of new initiatives, that might get me a 2 maybe. But if you say that you produced some initiatives which were then applied in 100 trusts across the UK, and audits showed that this led to health improvements in so many people, as evidenced by the reduction in something or other, showing some figures, that's then more likely to get you a 6 or a 10. So you have to describe the impact of what you do. This applies to your research, to your education. Saying I gave a really good lecture to lots of people and they all thought I was amazing, 0 points. If you can say that you gave a lecture to something and then feedback from the people suggested that they went away and they put it into their clinical practice, that's much more likely to score your points. So it's the impact on NHS patients. So date it, no abbreviations, and describe the impact on NHS patients. It's as simple as that. If you do that and demonstrate you're going over and above your job plan, the scorer can't help but give you a 6. If you get a 6 across all the domains, you'll probably get an award. That was the key message I got back. A bit more about the other domains, and there'll be a bit of repetition here, a few other points. As I said, membership of the committee isn't sufficient. What was its impact? Give data. The weasel words are, I led something, or I was part of the team which did something. The problem there is, I led something. That could just mean, I was just part of a gang of people. And some scorers say, I read that to mean that I was part of a group but didn't actually do anything. So you need to describe the actual impact of what you did. Don't use hyperlinks to try and treat the word count. Plenty of people do that and people won't read them. Don't just give a list of important committee memberships. That will score 0 unless you describe the impact. Remember to do the dates, no abbreviations. MI to me means methyl isothiazolinone, because it's one of the commonest allergens I come across causing eczema. MI to the rest of this room probably means something different. Don't forget to include patient and public involvement work, which you can put into any section, including education or training. If you've done some research in education, you can put that either into the education section or into the research section with the impact of that. I'm repeating myself about dates and abbreviations and about not duplicating things. On research and innovation, again, how does the research translate into practice and what is the evidence it's done so? If you're somebody who's a big researcher, don't just give a list of grants. That won't give you any score, you any marks. Just saying I've got £4 million worth of grants from these following people. That doesn't score. It's the impact of the research. Talk about new techniques, new service models, systematic uptake of innovations, give evidence how many people benefit. If you can say this is benefiting all the people with a particular disease, give an estimate of how many that will be and some measure of its impact. And just remember to mention whether, on research particularly, whether you've got any time in your job plan for research. Most people listening to this will have no time in their job plan for research. Therefore, it's very easy to score highly on your research. If you've got nothing in your job plan and you've done some research which has an impact, almost by definition, that's a 6. Whereas if you're somebody who's a 9 PA researcher, you're expected to do a shed load of work as part of your research, as part of your job. And so it's actually much harder to demonstrate that your research has an impact on NHS's patients over and above what is expected. And the other thing on research and innovation is no jam tomorrow. Promises that I've done a wonderful bit of research, which in the future is going to lead to marvellous breakthroughs and this, that and the other, is not going to score very highly. There's lots of people put in the jam tomorrow stuff to demonstrate impact on what's happened now. The final domain, the 5th domain, is causing a bit of sort of concern about people. What is it all about? This is the additional national impact domain. People don't know what to put into that. What we were told is the sort of things which people are putting into it is, for example, work for charities, describe the impact of your work you're doing, work for patient groups, patient support groups, work with patient focus groups, maybe work you've done on diversity, improving opportunities for people across the NHS. Although you may not repeat what has been used somewhere else, you may want to talk about one of your initiatives you've talked about in domains 1 to 4 and a different impact that it has. So domain 5 is really an opportunity to, if you've been over your word count in some other part of the application, to squeeze in some extra stuff there, which you just can't quite fit in somewhere else. International activities is an interesting one. You won't score anything for international activities. There's something which is called an air miles application, where people just give a great big list of lectures they've given overseas. That again won't score you anything unless you describe how that activity in some way benefits the NHS, the British public or NHS patients. A few final points which just to bring up. One thing which was a real surprise to me is that I'm not allowed to proofread, edit, critique or help people with their applications. Apparently, if you're somebody who does scoring on a regional committee, you're completely forbidden from doing that. And apparently that's for 2 reasons. One is that you might then look at an application which you've helped write, which then you might be biased to score highly. And secondly, it avoids the self-perpetuating networks of applicants who are good. And linked to that, apparently applicants will be asked to state if they have received support from people. This sort of what the trusts and specialist societies have been asked to do is to give talks like this, to give people general advice and to encourage everybody to apply, to avoid just, so I'm not just supporting my mates and encouraging them to apply. If you've got a job which isn't the typical clinician job, say you're a clinical director or a medical director, or you're a clinical academic, again, describe how many PDAs you've got for that, what the job is expected to do, but then what you're doing over and above what you might be expected to in your job, how you've performed over and above in that area, the impact it's had, rather than just talking about what the job itself won't necessarily give you a higher score. So this is my last slide. To reiterate, make it really clear, remember the point that it's going to be read by lay readers. avoid getting 0 scores because it's unreadable and unintelligible. Make it very clear. Use bullet points. Date everything. If it's not dated, you get a 0 score. Don't use abbreviations, which people won't understand. Describe the impact clearly. Again, if you're putting something down and there's no impact statement or there's no figures or impact, again, it won't score highly. And make sure that impact is on the UK. Try and make sure that you don't leave any domain blank. If you leave a domain blank, you're going to get a 0 or a 2 in it. If you can, put down something, even if you're not sure about it, put down something which is over and above in that domain. Don't duplicate. And the key last point is in believe in yourself and go for it. This is all about encouraging the people who might not have thought that they could do it in the past, might have thought that's not for me. Believe in yourself and go for it, and just have a go and see what happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nick. So if we just stop sharing the slides and then we can come back together. So I also score on the regional committee, and I think we've got 1 or 2 others in the trust who do. There was a time when we only had 1 person from here on any of those committees, which was pretty woeful, really. And the first time I became a member of the regional committee is in the old system, and they all went, oh, somebody from Norwich, that's odd. So it's that much of a difference. And this is very different from the old system, isn't it? It's very, very, very different. It's about national impact. It really is. And if you are paid to do something, you will score no points for it. It's about over and above work, isn't it, Nick?
Absolutely, yeah.
Kathy, did you want to come in with anything before we take any brief questions?
Yes, thank you. I mean, the reason I wanted to come was because I think I'm sort of at an earlier stage in all this. I wanted to share just some of my experience. So I got a bronze in the last year when it was that system. And I wanted to say a few things. One is I don't do what I did, and I didn't apply for 10 years, which I only realised, and this is in the local points now, I didn't realise until 10 years had gone that long had gone. So I would just say to people, please just do it. Because I just, undersold, never got round to it, and then realised. So I would say go for it. The second thing is, I'm just not sure with what Nick has just said, is that I did ask some people to look and at it, not people who were scoring, but people who'd got them. One of them's here, he can out himself if he wants to, but and I found it I approached 3 people, one a contemporary of mine where I used to be a consultant on St Thomas's, cardiologist like myself, my generation, who got one the year before, and I just showed it to him, and I showed it to 2 people here who were also physicians who'd got them recently, and that was helpful. But I think, is that allowed if they're not?
I was really surprised. I mean, I actually, and not on this call, but I went to the training on Tuesday, and on Monday somebody sent me an application, and I read through it and gave some critique back again, and I've done it for.
I've been doing it forever, ever since I got my bronze 20 years ago.
Totally stunned when they said this. I quizzed them. I asked them about 3 or 4 times in different ways. Well, can we just give general advice? Can we do this? I said, absolutely not. No.
But that's because you're presumably one of the
I think you're a scorer, yeah.
I volunteered to Erica that I would happily look at somebody else's. But that's not. But I'm not a scorer. I've been a scorer.
Yeah.
When I was a junior consultant, I was part of that diverse panel at St Thomas's because they wanted seniors and juniors looking at the national.
So was that an external scorer or an internal trust scorer?
I was internal trust because I was.
So that doesn't count.
Only looking.
So that doesn't count.
My impression is if you're not on the scoring committee, you can give advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would say to people, that's my second point. The first point is do it.
Stuff today.
Yeah, and second point is do ask somebody who's in the nearest job to you. So for me, I chose other physicians. And just ask them if they were successful to look at yours. And then the third thing is the business about numbers and, because my looking at it, I thought that there are some domains like research I hadn't done a lot, but actually once you look at it and list it, there's some stuff to put there. And then it's, even if you've only made a difference, it's about the numbers. It's about, I introduced a new way of doing it, and the uptake from patients went from 46 to 97%. So it's about numbers, isn't it? Trying to put that, and where you can look at things against national benchmarks. So my specialty, both of them have national standards and stuff, and so you can say, I did this and it increased our compliance from that to that, because that's a national benchmark. And I just also had a suggestion about the kind of thing that might go in domain 5. For me, it was that a society, a new professional society that I'd been instrumental in starting, had suddenly got quite a big role in COVID. And we had to, because it's pregnancy, heart disease, and that was a shielding guidance. And suddenly we had to turn around some shielding guidance in 3 days, and then it went out nationally. And so that it wasn't a domain 5 then, but I put that in, and that's the sort of thing I think might go in domain 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, things like nice guidance could go in. If you're working on a nice guidance
Yeah.
plan, I guess that could go into it
Yeah.
as well, couldn't it?
So I think it's and when there's anything that's nationally benchmarked and you can show how you've improved against it, because those standards are already set, aren't they?
And I would urge anybody who's interested in applying, I can match you to other people who I know are not scorers. So if you let me know, I can match to people who I know will help. Obviously, Nick and I can't. Kathy's offered. There are others in the trust who I know have retired and returned and have not got awards anymore and are not scorers, who I know will help. So I don't want anybody who wants to apply to feel that they're kind of in isolation. I sign them all off. So I've sent an email to everybody with the timeline to give me a few days to write the little paragraph that we have to write. And I do those with Sam, the chief exec. It's about checking you're actually employed here, checking you earn what you say you earn, checking your job plan is what you say it is. You will be surprised, in my nearly 5 years in this job, I have had Clinical Excellence Award applications where people have not been truthful about what they do, either their job plan or their income. And obviously, those cannot get a citation and support from us organisationally. We no longer do the all his mates think he's lovely and he works very hard kind of thing. We sign it off that we agree with the content from an employer's perspective and support the application. So that comes to me, and I've got, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, Hannah, I think, haven't I, to turn those around. So that's the process, everybody.
I think there's a couple of other things worth saying. They're obliged to award all the awards.
Yeah.
Okay, so they will all be awarded, rather like local points now, they all have to be awarded, and it's a new system. So there won't be people won't be au fait with it. So there's not going to be vast numbers of people applying. And the other thing that's very worth saying is that the previous national awards were heavily weighted with clinical academics, heavily weighted. They got, well, as you already pointed out, got doubly awarded.
Yeah.
Got awarded for doing what you're paid to do. That's not going to take place anymore. So the playing field is much, much more level here. So I think it's a good time to go for this now.
Yeah, I agree.
Catch on.
And the chance of me not supporting you is only if you lie on your form, just to say. Or you're not employed here. I have had a couple try that who've got honoraries with us, and it's like, I don't think you're on my payroll. I'm not sure I can do that. So, and if there's any questions from anybody, I'll happily field them, filter them, bring Nick in. Well, obviously, Nick and I can't edit I used to do lots of editorial on these. My only feedback is please make it readable. As scorers, we do about 80 applications, 80 as a scorer. If I can't understand it and the English is hopeless and it's full of abbreviations, I just go 2. Move on. And that sounds harsh, but if I'm doing a pile of 80 of these, that is just the way it is. So it has to be legible.
That's why it's almost the grandmother test, isn't it? Give it to your parent or your grandmother or somebody who's really outside it, and just get them to reflect back what they can make sense of it. And if they start saying, "Well, what on earth are all these letters here?" and what does this, it's not going to cut the mustard, is it?
And I think that's particularly important that a lay person could read it, because historically we didn't have lay scorers and we do now. So these are very, very capable. And when I've been on calls with them and in training and refresh with them, they're very capable people, but they are not medical. Kathy?
I was going to ask, there's one bit that and it's still here in this form because I've looked at it. It's about what is your trust CQC rating? And
I've circulated it to everybody, what to put.
Have you've put, but this is about what is your role in it, isn't it? There's a question about what is your contribution or role. I found that quite difficult to answer. Do you think there's a bit of...
So I think it's actually quite clear in the domains that evidence that you practice safe, caring,
Yeah.
all of those domains. And I sent everybody round the grid that shows and the summary in the grid, and you can see your own specialty area.
Because sometimes that specialty area, it's like for us, myself at the time, it was medicine. It was the whole of medicine, and they'd only looked at something like outpatients. So it's quite difficult to say what's your contribution to making it better, but you just have to say something, don't you?
And because of COVID, lots of trusts are in the same position as us and haven't been reassessed. I'm
not sure I actually scored on that area,
No.
because when we did the scoring on Tuesday, we didn't actually score that section at all.
I don't think you asked, but I still think people are worried about whether it will matter what you put. And I think it only...
I'm minded that the majority of people are going to watch this as a recording, and we could probably talk about the machinations and details of this for quite a long time. But I just suggest, Andy?
Can I just ask for clarification again? I mean, you've mentioned it briefly, Nick and Erica, about the makeup of the regional committee. So in terms of numbers and the mix, you say there's lay people, is it healthcare managers?
Healthcare managers, yes.
Healthcare managers. Yes. And the mix of specialties?
There's a mix of specialties, and so I think you're allowed to be honest, even if you haven't got a merit award.
Yes.
A national clinical impact award. So you can, so there are people who are
trainees?
Well, there were trainees, but there are people who are much younger than I was, which is surprise to most people really. But it was a real...
I think the website has all of that detail on it, actually, the NCI.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is far more diverse than when I was first doing this, when I used to have to go up to Addenbrooke's and be faced with being kind of the hick from the country, scoring on behalf of everybody else, and faced with a whole load of academics.
None of whom have done a clinical work day in the last 20 years. But
yeah. Lovely. Any questions on screen before we close? Very nice to see you all. Thank you for coming.
Do you want to put anything to chat if anyone's got any particular questions?
John, I've got the chat open. Nobody's come through on the chat. So that's lovely. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks. Excellent.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good luck. Go for it.
Someone knows how to work the bits.
Yeah, Hannah knows how to do all of that.